Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, January 5th, 2024. President Joe Biden makes his first big re-election campaign speech of the new year, talking about freedom and threats to democracy. He spoke near Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, where General George Washington camped through the winter during the Revolutionary War, on a day before the third anniversary of the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. Coming up, the president's remarks, plus Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene in Iowa campaigning for Republican presidential candidate and former President Donald Trump, and Republican candidate Nikki Haley in New Hampshire. And we'll talk about C-SPAN's comprehensive Campaign 2024 website with C-SPAN Vice President Peter Kiley. Jobs report for December, the U.S. added 216,000 jobs. Unemployment rate stays at 3.7%. The White House Budget Director Shalanda Young talks about the chances of a partial federal government shutdown in 2 weeks. She and House Republicans spar over which side has the better record on border security. And Attorney General Merrick Garland speaks about combating violent crime, including what he says is a disturbing spike in violence against public servants, including FBI agents, judges, presidential candidates, members of Congress, the military, and election workers. He says these threats of violence are unacceptable. They threaten the fabric of our democracy. NBC 10 Philadelphia, previewing President Biden's speech today, writes, President Joe Biden will kick off his 2024 pitch to voters Friday, the day before the anniversary of the violent riot at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, by posing the question of whether democracy is still a sacred cause worth sacrificing for. The president will speak from near Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, where General Washington and the Continental Army spent a bleak winter nearly 250 years ago. And he'll talk about how Washington spoke to his army about democracy as a sacred cause. And the January 6th attack was a vivid reminder of how that democracy can be tested. President Biden will also lay out then-President Donald Trump's role in the attack as a mob of the Republican supporters overran the Capitol. That was from NBC 10 in Philadelphia. Here's part of the president's speech at Montgomery County Community College, Bluebell, Pennsylvania.
In the winter of 1777, it was harsh and cold as the Continental Army marched to Valley Forge. General George Washington knew he faced the most daunting of tasks: to fight and win a war against the most powerful empire that existed in the world at the time. His mission was clear: liberty, not conquest; freedom, not domination; national independence, not individual glory. America made a vow: never again would we bow down to a king. Months ahead would be incredibly difficult. But General Washington knew something in his bones, something about the spirit of the troops he was leading, something about the soul of the nation he was struggling to be born. In his general order, he predicted, and I quote, "With one heart and one mind, with fortitude and with patience, they would overcome every difficulty," the troops he was leading. And they did. They did. This army that lacked blankets and food, clothes and shoes, this army whose march left bloody bare footprints in the snow, this ragtag army made up of ordinary people, their mission, George Washington declared, was nothing less than a sacred cause. That was the phrase he used, a sacred cause. Freedom, liberty, democracy, American democracy. I just visited the grounds of Valley Forge. I've been there a number of times from the time I was a Boy Scout years ago. You know, it's the very site that I think every American should visit, because it tells a story of the pain and the suffering and the true patriotism it took to make America. Today, we gather in a new year, some 246 years later, just one day before January 6th. A date forever shared in our memory because it was on that day that we nearly lost America, lost it all. Today, we're here to answer the most important of questions. Is democracy still America's sacred cause? I mean it. This is not rhetorical, academic, or hypothetical. Whether democracy is still America's sacred cause is the most urgent question of our time. And it's what the 2024 election is all about. The choice is clear. Donald Trump's campaign is about him, not America, not you. Donald Trump's campaign is obsessed with the past, not the future. He's willing to sacrifice our democracy, put himself in power. Our campaign is different. For me and Kamala, our campaign is about America. It's about you. It's about every age and background that occupy this country. It's about the future we're going to continue to build together. And our campaign is about preserving and strengthening our American democracy.
President Biden, 2024 Democratic presidential candidate at a campaign event near Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. He'll be campaigning on Monday in South Carolina, which will hold the first Democratic presidential primary on February 3rd. He'll be at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, site of a racist mass shooting in 2015. The Biden campaign says of both the Charleston attack and the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, America is worried about the rise of political violence and determined to stand against it. NBC News reporting that the Supreme Court on Friday agreed to consider whether former President Donald Trump could be deemed ineligible to run for office again because of his actions leading up to the January 6th attack on the Capitol, a case that could have a seismic impact on the presidential election. The justices will review a decision by the Colorado Supreme Court that said Trump could be barred from the Republican primary ballot in that state, but the ruling is likely to have national repercussions, potentially setting guidelines that would determine how every other state would handle the issue. The brief order said the case would be argued on February 8th. That's from NBC News. And the Colorado Supreme Court making its ruling based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, saying that anyone who swears an oath to uphold the Constitution cannot hold federal office if that person has engaged in insurrection. Donald Trump, Republican presidential candidate and former president, holding two rallies tonight in Iowa and Sioux City and Mason City ahead of the Republicans' first in the nation presidential caucuses on January 15th. One of Donald Trump's surrogate campaigners, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican of Georgia, was in Keokuk, Iowa, Thursday night.
We have to win this election in 2024, and we have to put President Trump back in the White House because we can trust him. He was our president for 4 years. I know they're rolling out the lines, President Trump is a dictator. Really? Okay. He was our president for 4 years. We know what he can do. Thanks so much. President Trump, yeah. So President Trump, they're like bringing out, President Trump is going to destroy democracy. Oh, really? Okay. What a joke. What a joke. No, we have to have President Trump because we have to protect free speech. And let me tell you the difference in all these candidates running. There is not one of them that knows what it's like to be attacked by the deep state, the media, big corporations, social media. Not one of them know what that's like. I can tell you right now, I know President Trump very well. He appreciates free speech and our freedoms more than any of you can understand because he is being persecuted, absolutely persecuted for his own speech. And that is a very big reason when you talk to your friends about, well, and DeSantis and blah, 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 Nikki Haley, yada, yada, yada. Let me tell you something. The man you want in the White House fighting to defend your freedoms, fighting to defend your speech, fighting to protect our border, fighting Washington, D.C. that loves war, say, no, we want peace. We do not want to go to war. The only one you can trust is President Trump.
Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican from Georgia, at a rally in Keokuk, Iowa, Thursday night on behalf of presidential candidate Donald Trump. Other surrogates who have campaigned for Donald Trump in Iowa include Congressman Matt Gaetz, Republican of Florida, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, former White House press secretary and now Arkansas governor, a Republican. The first Republican presidential primary will be in New Hampshire on January 23rd. Candidate Nikki Haley this week at an event in Londonderry, New Hampshire, responding to a TV ad about her stance on taxes that's been running in the state, funded by MAGA Inc., or Make America Great Again, a super PAC supporting Donald Trump. Here first is the ad, followed by the response from Nikki Haley.
Nikki Haley promised.
I will not now, not ever, support raising the gas tax.
Really? Not now? Not ever? Just 24 months later, high tax Haley flipped.
Let's increase the gas tax by 10 cents.
That's right. High tax Haley broke her promise.
Let's increase the gas tax.
Repeatedly backing higher taxes hurts families. New Hampshire can't afford Nikki High Tax Haley. Make America Great Again Inc. is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Now, President Trump has been paying me some attention these days. That's so nice of him. I have seen the commercials that you've seen. I've seen the little temper tantrums that he's been throwing. And let me tell you this. There is not one bit of it that's truthful. Not one. I never once signed or would have signed a tax increase in South Carolina. I think government makes too much money. The last thing I'm ever going to do is raise your taxes. We cut taxes in South Carolina. We saved $1 billion off the top at the UN. I have always looked to cut government, never to add to it. But if we're going to talk about Trump's economy, everybody talks about how good the economy was under Trump. And it was good, right? But at what cost? He put us $8 trillion in debt just in 4 years. Our kids will never forgive us for that. I'm an accountant. You don't go and fix the economy by going into debt. You fix the economy by getting yourself out of debt. That's what we can't have. And he wants to talk about raising taxes. In 2018, he proposed on all of us a 25-cent gas tax increase. We can't go into the next 4 years like that. So what I'll tell you is, we've got work to do. And we can get this done, regardless of what all the political pundits are saying on TV. They don't see the momentum we have on the ground. We've got it in Iowa. We've got it in New Hampshire. We've got hundreds of people showing up every day because they are tired of working for government and they want government to start serving the people again. And we can fix this, but in order to fix it, it's going to take a lot of courage. Courage from every single person in this room. Courage for me to run. And courage for every one of you to know. Don't complain about what happens in a general election if you don't play in this primary. It matters.
Nikki Haley, Republican presidential candidate, former governor of South Carolina, and former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations in the Trump administration, in Londonderry, New Hampshire, on Wednesday. Congressman Jamie Raskin, Democrat from Maryland, the ranking member on the Oversight Committee, was asked today about a report the committee Democrats published on Thursday titled White House for Sale, How Princes, Prime Ministers, and Premiers Paid Off President Trump. The report concludes that Donald Trump's businesses received at least $7.8 million in payments from foreign governments and government-backed entities from 20 countries while he was in the White House. The report focused on payments to 4 Trump-controlled businesses, Trump hotels in Washington, Las Vegas, and New York, and the Trump Tower in Manhattan. Here's Congressman Raskin.
It's very clear in the Constitution, the President of the United States may not accept a present, an emolument, which means a payment, an office or a title of any kind whatever from a prince, a king, or a foreign government without the consent of Congress. And yet we showed yesterday, we've got the documented receipts that Donald Trump pocketed $7.8 million from foreign governments, from China, from Saudi Arabia, from the United Arab Emirates, without ever coming to Congress first. It took us 7 years to accumulate all of this information. We've got a 150-page report with 750 footnotes, and they have not laid a glove on our report. They have not found a single thing that they claim to be factually inaccurate. All they're saying is, well, Donald Trump didn't take his salary of $400,000. I'm I'm sorry. Under the Constitution of the United States, that's all you're allowed to take is your salary. You can't get paid by Chinese communist bureaucrats or murderous Saudi monarchs. You've got to be paid by the American people. That's how the framers designed our Constitution.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, Democrat from Maryland, at a news conference on Capitol Hill today with other House Democrats on the third anniversary of the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, which is Saturday. More from the CBS News article. The Trump campaign didn't immediately respond to a request for comment on the new House Democratic Committee report. Trump dismissed the, quote, phony emoluments clause and concerns about his business dealings in 2019. The Trump Organization has said it voluntarily donated proceeds from foreign governments to the U.S. Treasury every year from 2018 to 2021. In 2017, the Trump Organization said it would rely on foreign representatives to self-report if they were paying a Trump company for something in their official capacity. That reporting from CBS News. The banner at C-SPAN's Campaign 2024 website is Campaign 2024, your unfiltered view of politics. And joining us now to talk about what you can find on this site is C-SPAN's Vice President, Peter Kiley. Welcome. What's there?
Thank you, Michael. It's a perfect time to start to talk to the audience about our Campaign 2024 website, as we are just a week away from coverage of Iowa, and followed by New Hampshire, and then deep racing towards Super Tuesday and all. Our site is really the most comprehensive resource on the internet for video coverage of the candidates. Our political editor, Nate Hurst, told me yesterday that since 2021, we've covered over 100 candidate events in Iowa and over 100 candidate events in New Hampshire. So people think the campaign is just starting this week. It's actually been going on quite some time, and all of those events are available on cspan.org/campaign 2024. As we head towards Iowa and New Hampshire, it will rack up a lot of new content in the coming weeks, and we can talk more about that.
How many candidates will people find there, and is it just the major parties, third parties, independents?
It is. There's about 24 candidates that we've listed on the Campaign 24 page. If you go towards the bottom of it, you'll see the declared candidates. They're there from the date of their announcement, and it runs through. And if you click on any of those, you can go and see all of the appearances that we've covered from them. And it runs from Donald J. Trump to Nikki Haley to Vivek Ramaswamy. And we have Marianne Williamson, we have Robert Kennedy Jr. and Cornel West and Cenk Uygur. I'm not going to name them all, but you'll get a feeling that, yes, it is everyone that's on the major party candidates and some of the independents as well.
And besides the candidates, we cover events where we have reporters, pollsters, commentators. Is that there as well?
It is there. There's a section. It's sort of laid out in what I call carousels, rows of different content. And the site starts with a program that we've begun producing called 2024 Campaign Trail. And that sort of highlights from each week of what's happening. It's clips of different events, and it's discussions with reporters and campaign officials about what's going on. Next to that, then, is just most recent videos, and that's where you'll see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of events that we've covered, and that's where you'll be able to find on-demand coverage of the events that we're covering in Iowa and New Hampshire the next couple of weeks. As you work down, though, there's this thing called Campaign Background, and that includes panel discussions with political experts and all. It also has a lot of our programming from the Washington Journal, when we have reporters and campaign officials on and taking viewer calls and talking about what's happening on the campaign.
What about scheduling? Do we have upcoming events, or in general just when the caucuses and primaries will be?
One of the great tools we have to go beyond video is each election cycle we partner with the Associated Press to bring really a comprehensive U.S. election surveys. And so on the site right now, we have added a map of the United States. And it is, at this point, generally a calendar. So you can roll your cursor over the map to each state and see when their primary or caucus is going to take place. as they occur, results and a whole lot more data and information is added there. But essentially, at this point, it's a calendar of the 2024 campaign.
We're talking with Peter Kiley, C-SPAN's vice president, about the campaign 2024 website at cspan.org. So we're deep into this cycle, but there's a lot more to go. What can people expect in the next few weeks and even into the next few months?
Michael, starting next Tuesday, C-SPAN will have a couple of camera crews roving Iowa, covering candidate events, talking to caucus goers, and preparing for the following Monday's caucus, where we'll have live coverage of a caucus from Iowa. All of that coverage, and there will be live events every day. Some of it will be on television, but all of that coverage will be live on our website and the C-SPAN Now mobile app. And all of that coverage will be archived on the Campaign 2024 page we've discussed. The day after Iowa, us crews and others will be in New Hampshire, and day in and day out, extensive coverage of all the candidate events, again, talking to voters in New Hampshire, and extensive coverage of the New Hampshire primary on that following Tuesday. So the next couple of weeks will be an enormous amount of live and all of it available on demand coverage as the campaign truly kicks off through these first primaries and caucuses.
Viewer engagement, listener engagement, a big part of C-SPAN. Can there be feedback from people as to what they see and hear?
We're about to add an element to the site where you can record on your phone or on your laptop or desktop, wherever you have a camera, a short up to 30-second video telling us what issue you think matters most in the campaign for 2024 and post that. So we'll have a gallery where our viewers are able to post that, and users of the website can go and not only post what they believe, but they can see what Americans all across the United States are saying. We'll also have some C-SPAN representatives out in the field. They're going to be in both Iowa and New Hampshire and other places around the country as the campaign progresses, with little cameras and walking around and going to election events and to college campuses and diners and asking people that question, and we'll be posting those there as well. As we do with C-SPAN through the Journal and through all of our nearly 45 years, we love to hear from regular people that watch us, people that are interested, to get their viewpoints. And the website will have that up probably in a week or two.
Peter Kiley, Vice President for C-SPAN, and again, the website, cspan.org/campaign 2024. Thank you very much.
Michael, thank you. Thank you, Michael. If people just go to the cspan.org, you'll find a link to Campaign 2024 right at the top of the page. It's an easy way to find it. Thanks so much for talking to me about the website.
Washington Today continues in a moment.
We want to take a minute to ask for your help. Your financial support will ensure that C-SPAN can continue to produce podcasts that inform you about national politics, introduce you to the latest nonfiction books, and provide valuable historical context to today's news. Make a donation today and be a part of C-SPAN's future. Visit c-span.org/donate.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app, which is free, and wherever you find your podcasts. From the Associated Press, the nation's employers added a robust 216,000 jobs last month, the latest sign that the American labor market remains resilient even in the face of sharply higher interest rates. Friday's government report showed that December's job gain exceeded the 173,000 that were added in November. The unemployment rate was unchanged at 3.7%, the 23rd straight month that joblessness has come in below 4%. But this also from the AP article. Some details of the report may disappoint the inflation fighters at the Federal Reserve, who might now be inclined to delay any cuts in their benchmark interest rate. Average hourly wages rose 4.1% from a year earlier, up from a 4% gain in November, which could make it harder for the Fed to slow inflation back to its 2% target. The Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen was interviewed today on CNN about the jobs report and the strength of the economy.
A year ago, most forecasters believed we would fall into a recession. Obviously, that hasn't happened. We have a good, strong labor market. today's news, as you mentioned, showed that the unemployment rate remains low, and we added 216,000 jobs. Now, the pace of job creation over the last 3 months averages 165. That's down from a year ago when the economy was still recovering from the pandemic. But it's something that's expected and desirable, consistent with an economy that is now recovered and is transitioned to stable and steady growth. So the labor market continues to fire on all cylinders. Other reports this week, a low level of initial claims for unemployment insurance, job openings remain at healthy levels. And importantly, inflation has come way down. Over the last 6 months, the measure that the Fed watches most has been running right at their target of 2%. And Americans are beginning to feel that. And some surveys are suggesting that they're becoming more optimistic, which is something that's really good to see.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on CNN. On Wall Street, the Dow up 25, NASDAQ up 13, S&P up 8. White House Budget Director Shalanda Young said today that she is not optimistic about reaching a deal with Republicans in Congress to avoid a partial government shutdown. She mentioned the trip by over 60 House Republicans this week to the U.S.-Mexico border and the comments by some of those members calling for the partial government shutdown unless their version of border security and immigration reform becomes law. There are also major disagreements on overall spending levels. Temporary federal government funding expires for some parts of the government on January 19th and for the rest on February 2nd. Shalanda Young spoke at a reporters' breakfast hosted by the Christian Science Monitor.
We have to remind people this budget agreement was not a handshake, it was a vote of Congress. It is not optional. They have to keep their word and live by the numbers that were agreed to by 70% of the House Republican caucus voted for the debt deal. 76% of House Democrats voted for that deal. And that is the only way to get appropriations bills done without the threat of shutdown. But 14 days, I'm typically optimistic. Don't mark me down as optimistic this morning, especially after some of the remarks I've seen over the last couple of days since the border, trying to conflate not only holding up Ukraine and Israel funding now for border, some in the House Republican Conference now saying shut down over border as well, which is not a great thing for the country.
Shalanda Young, director of the White House Office of Management and Budget, at a Christian Science Monitor breakfast with reporters from many news outlets. A story from the Washington Examiner. The office of Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, circulated a memo Friday morning rejecting the White House's attempt to blame House Republicans for the border crisis. The president has requested billions in new border funding. Biden officials point out, while the House voted for funding cuts they claim would slash thousands of Border Patrol jobs. The memo, circulated by Raj Shah, Speaker Johnson's Deputy Chief of Staff for Communications, represents an effort to, quote, correct the record on what he says is a desperate attempt by the White House to, again his words, shift blame for a crisis their policies have induced. The request for border funding, Biden asked for $14 billion as part of a larger national security supplemental, is little more than smoke and mirrors, Shah said. Most of that request has zero or little to do with border security. And as for the claim that House Republicans voted to cut Border Patrol, Shah called the line a debunked talking point, citing fact-checkers who say the statistic is the result of the White House's back-of-the-napkin math rather than an actual appropriation. That was from Washington Examiner. Back to White House Budget Director Shalanda Young, and this question from Linda Feldman, Washington Bureau Chief of the Christian Science Monitor.
So you may have seen that Raj Shah, Speaker Johnson's Chief of Staff for Communications, released his memo this morning saying that he's, of course, refuting the White House, saying that their fiscal 24 Homeland Security Appropriations bill increased funding for the border and didn't cut it. And he says that the White House $14 billion supplemental for the border is smoke and mirrors. So what's your response?
I'm not sure how more money for Border Patrol, more money for NI equipment, the equipment that detects fentanyl coming across the border, which everyone's fascinated with who's been in the border. I've been to a few in my day. In my day on the Hill, it was bipartisan to want to do more of that equipment. The president's request asked for more of that equipment, more money to install those of our land ports of entry, more money for agents, more money for asylum officers. I get it. If you want to close the border and not have an immigration policy, why would you want to fix it? We want to fix it. No, we don't want people waiting 5-6 years before they get called in, have their case adjudicated. Not only is that bad for our border policy, that's bad for those families to come, get adjusted in this country, and then be snatched away from their communities. Some children, the only communities they've ever known. We have to do something to fix it. But you can't think that people should not immigrate to this country and want to fix this process. If you don't have that belief that we should have a functioning immigration process, you say no to all of this. And you're starting to hear the rhetoric, close the border. What does that mean? What does that mean about our immigration policy, not just our border policy? And there's something deeper there. And again, a few years ago, Republicans would have said, sure, to more asylum officers. We know that makes the system work better. Now you're saying just this willingness to not even have an immigration system that works even to get people legally through the system. That's concerning. And that doesn't leave a lot of room when there's just a fundamental disagreement of how this country's values are set, to find some agreement with a problem we all see. There's just a fundamental difference in values, frankly, that is stopping this. And then we're going to argue about numbers. The numbers don't lie. Every time Republicans say they want to cut non-defense discretionary, guess what's in there? It is Homeland Security. When you cut the top lines, when you have a bill like Limit, Save, Grow, when you have a House Appropriations bill that cuts, that makes top line cuts of 20 and 30%, Homeland Security is a part of that. But we use these words like non-defense discretionary because most Americans don't know what is in that. That's Homeland Security, that is veterans, that is child care, that is Head Start, that is NIH. And when you start listing that, people go, well, why would we cut that? That is not the problem for our deficits. When they want to talk about Trump tax cuts, I'm happy to have that conversation. We did not get into this problem because we funded biomedical research or our Border Patrol. So that's my answer to that.
Okay.
I would be worried, too, if I put out a DHS bill and had my members vote for that. I'd be trying to correct the record, too.
OMB Director Shalanda Young at the breakfast hosted by the Christian Science Monitor for reporters from a variety of news outlets. Congressman Dan Muser, Republican of Pennsylvania, was interviewed this morning on Newsmax TV, asked about what White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said about border security and House Republicans.
The White House was asked about the ongoing border crisis. Here's the response from the press secretary. Let's watch.
What is the administration doing right now to actually improve the crisis at the border?
We have House Republicans that's literally blocking the president's effort to do something. That's what they're doing. They're playing political games. They're doing political stunts. Literally, House Republicans themselves voted to decrease the amount of Border Patrol agents by 2,000.
She blames you, Congressman, and your colleagues. Your response?
Right. Well, it's totally untrue. In fact, it's a lie related to the 2,000. And the goal to blame Republicans, all we do is talk about it. We passed H.R. 2. We go to the border. We had almost 60 members, only Republicans there. Biden and, of course, Kamala Harris don't even make it to the border. The American people should be totally insulted by the idea that they're trying to just pass blame, which is completely untrue. And by the way, the money that he's asking for right now, which turns out to be in the supplement, about $3 billion, is for processing and resettling. That's all it is. It's not about securing the border. They are upside down and backwards, and they are the cause of this catastrophe that's taking place. Emma, we're going to do everything we can as in the House majority to keep the supplement, securing our border first, if we're going to fund anything for the Ukraine and elsewhere. We're going to do everything we can to remove resettlement processing dollars out of the budget. But again, I'm afraid the American people need to understand they're the ones that are going to correct this problem by voting Biden out, and President Trump, who fixed the problem, voting him in.
Congressman Dan Musier, Republican from Pennsylvania, on Newsmax TV. Attorney General Merrick Garland said today that more than 500 gun purchases have been blocked since a new gun law went into effect in 2022 that requires stricter background checks for people under 21 years of age. The Attorney General spoke at the Justice Department.
In addition, we are making good use of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act of 2022, known as BISCA, which expanded our authority to prosecute firearms traffickers and straw purchasers who buy guns for those barred by the law from possessing them. We have already charged over 300 defendants under that authority. And we are continuing to implement the enhanced background check requirements of BISCA for purchasers under the age of 21. Today, we are announcing that in the 19 months since the Act's passage, those checks have already kept 527 firearms out of the hands of young people who are prohibited from having them.
Attorney General Merrick Garland, part of his statement at the start of a meeting with senior Justice Department officials discussing combating violent crime of all sorts. The leaders of the FBI, ATF, DEA, and U.S. Marshals Service were there. The Attorney General noted that the FBI says the number of homicides fell 6% nationally between 2021 and 2022, and the Major Cities Chiefs Association of Police Executives reports a double-digit decrease in the number of murders across 69 major cities through September 2023 as compared to the same time period during 2020. But Merrick Garland saying this is not a time to relax our efforts. We have so much more to do. He made a special mention today of prosecutions of those involved in the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol and violence and threats of violence directed towards public officials.
At the same time that we're seeing an encouraging downward trend in violent crime, we are also witnessing a deeply disturbing spike in threats against those who serve the public. In just the final months of 2023, the department investigated and charged individuals with making violent threats against FBI agents, federal judges, including a Supreme Court justice, presidential candidates, members of Congress, members of the military, and election workers. Just this week, several bomb threats were made against courthouses across the country. U.S. Marshals Service, FBI, and our state and local partners are aggressively investigating those bomb threats, which constitute serious offenses. And just yesterday, we arrested and charged an individual with threatening to kill a member of Congress and his children. This is just a small snapshot of a larger trend that has included threats of violence against those who administer our elections, ensure our safe travel, teach our children, report the news, represent their constituents, and keep our communities safe. These threats of violence are unacceptable. They threaten the fabric of our democracy. Over the past several years, the Justice Department has dedicated itself to combating these threats. We are meeting here today to determine how we can double down on those efforts in the new year.
Attorney General Merrick Garland at today's Justice Department meeting on violent crime. An article today at the Wall Street Journal, Wayne LaPierre, the embattled longtime leader of the National Rifle Association, is resigning from the nation's largest gun rights group on the eve of a civil trial in which the New York Attorney General is seeking his ouster, as well as financial penalties for years of alleged corruption at the nonprofit organization. The NRA said LaPierre, 74 years old, cited health as the reason for his decision to step down and said the resignation would be effective January 31st. That reporting from the Wall Street Journal. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word, and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. It is free. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.